Welcome back to the JumpifyLabs Podcast, the show for founders who want growth without the guesswork. Here, we talk about AI and the systems driving predictable growth. And today's guest has spent over 2 decades in the engine room of growing companies. He's helped organizations scale past 9 figures, led turnaround efforts when things were broken, and now he's helping service-based business owners identify exactly where they're stuck and how to break through it. Eric Whitmoyer, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Jay. I'm excited to be here today.
The pleasure's all mine, brother. Let's kick things off. You've helped some companies grow to over 100 million. What patterns are you seeing that most founders will miss very early on?
Early on, I would say that actually the biggest challenge that they start with early on that is a missed opportunity is they aren't clear on where they're going when they start. Most founder-led businesses, when they get started, it's like you're just out there hustling to make some money, to bring the revenue in. And the challenge is they don't go into it with a long-term vision. They go into it with an idea that they're going to sell some product or sell some service and generate and build a business, but they're not clear on where they're going long-term. And I know that sounds like, I'll figure that out as I go. No, that's actually part of the problem. It's kind of like playing golf and not having a flag to go for when you go to tee off. If you're sitting in the tee box and you go to tee off, and you hit the ball in 180 degrees in the wrong direction, it's going to take you a lot longer to find that hole than, if you're not clear on where you're going. So not having that flag out there to know which direction to start and which direction to keep moving towards might take you 12 strokes. It might take you 3 strokes to get there. But if you're not clear on which direction you're going for certain, it's definitely going to take you much longer. And so that's a big mistake. A lot of people, they just don't have that vision down the road and where they might be going. And it doesn't even have to be perfect. It just has to get them going in that right direction.
Absolutely agree with that 100%. You know, a lot of times when we start a business with the idea, I want to make money, right? Because we're either capped in a career, we have this passion, XYZ, whatever that causes us to go down that route. But then at the same time, when you want to just make money, there's so many different avenues you go. And then a lot of times I speak with people that they've gone one way and then realize it's nowhere near their North Star. So 100% agree with you there. And when founders are coming to you and they're in a position of where they're stuck, what's usually the thing that's broken that they're trying to fix?
Mm-hmm. All right, this is going to be a harsh one. It's usually them. And I say it's them. They may not be broken. They're just not aware of what they don't know. They don't know what they don't know. And so part of the challenge is, like any one of us, we're all competent, capable people, right? Anybody who starts a business, anybody who's crazy enough to go out and start a business, they have the drive and ambition to go make something happen. The challenge becomes is when you try and take on things that you're not prepared for, that's when you start tripping over and creating challenges for the business that you aren't going to be able to fix by yourself and not necessarily always willing to ask for help. Right. And there's some sense of pride in that and ego maybe, but there's definitely some factors that become a challenge because you're so focused on finding the result and being, having the resolve to figure it out on your own. The truth of the matter is that just adds to how long it takes you to get to that end goal. Right. So why not shortcut that path and look for, quicker ways to get there by asking somebody who's already been there, done that, and get some guidance from them. But I often think that the founders that really find their way to where they want to go faster are the ones that are looking at and identifying, hey, I'm really good at these areas, but I'm not so good at these areas. And that's a lot of what we teach our clients is get clear on what you're really good at, identify what you're not as good at, and then identify how we can get solutions to solve those challenges. And when we do that effectively, we find that your synergies come together much faster and you're not trying to recreate the wheel, so to speak, in areas where you're just not as familiar.
That's a strong point as well, because if we stick to our strengths, then it feels less like having to climb uphill and you kind of let other people stick to their strengths, of course. Yeah, absolutely. So you're now currently building My Biz Coaches. What was the decision or what was happening that made you decide to build a team of coaches instead of staying solo?
COVID, to put it simply. It wasn't really COVID. It was the advent. It was everything that came out of during that period of time during COVID. When in my professional career, in the 25 years that I spent running organizations and sales teams and as an executive, growing the last couple of teams that we grew and then having an exit, I learned a lot more about business than I probably gave myself credit for, particularly when I started out in the coaching space. I initially started as a sales consultant. What happened with my first client and then the preceding series of clients was, um, as I got started, I had a lot of early success with the sales focus, but then very shortly into it, 5 months into it, COVID kicked in. And all of a sudden, people had all these other challenges. It wasn't about driving sales results. Yes, sales were a challenge for many businesses during that period of time, particularly the service-based industry. But more specifically, there were questions about their business that they couldn't answer and did not know or did not have maybe a good framework to work through to make better decisions based on everything that was going on. Who plans for chaos theory? No, nobody plans for, the most, I don't know, the distracting thing to take place in 50 years, right? So with that said, what happened was it it was and over that time I continue to see a lot of the same things popping up. And in that particular case, it was having conversations with owners that needed financial support, which the government was providing through the ERC program and the PPP program and the idle loan program and things like that. Most business owners that I was engaging with, and that didn't matter if they did 200,000 a year or they did 10, 15, 20 million dollars a year. They didn't know the steps to go through. Like they would get the direction from the government or whatever, and then they didn't know what to do next. And they were looking for somebody to lead them through that process. And I don't know if you remember, but the banks weren't really helpful in the beginning because their money was going directly to the bigger companies. And the smaller everyday mom and pop operators were like struggling because they're like, we don't know what to do. So anyway, the point was what I uncovered for me was a lot of people out there that knew a lot less about their business than they probably thought they did. And when I say that, I don't mean about the technical skill of what they do, but more specifically about how to run a business. For 25 years, I got paid by somebody else to run their business. And what I realized as I started engaging more of these founder-led businesses, these owners that were running these operations every day, they know certain components of the business really well. They just don't understand these other pieces of it. Like they don't understand finance typically very well, in many cases. They're not necessarily the great managers of people. They have teams for the first time, or maybe not they haven't had a team for a long time. And now all of a sudden they're working with a team and nobody ever gave them the guidance on how to manage that team. So these things started popping up over and over and over. And it was one of my very first podcasts I did. It was literally almost 5 years ago. And on the podcast, I wanted to come out with something pithy that would be really kind of like engaging that I could go out there. And so one of my first coaches, his name was Joe Smith. And I'm not making that up. That really is his name, Joe Smith. But Joe and I were working on what's something that we could share as our mission statement. And I said, I've got this idea. I got $1 billion idea, $1 billion mission. And he's like, $1 billion, that's pretty, so it's just you and me. We're getting this billion. And I'm like, we're going to help 1,000 small business owners profitably achieve $1 million in top line revenue. And, why $1 million? Well, $1 million, only 6% of businesses in the United States actually ever achieve $1 million in top line revenue on an annualized basis. So I said, if we can move 1,000 businesses, we'll have made an impact, and that 1,000 times the million, it's $1 billion. And he's like, yeah, that sounds really cool. So we ran with that. What I didn't realize was how many businesses are so far removed that they just don't know what they don't know, as I mentioned earlier. And so the challenge became, as more I uncovered this, I started tugging on the threads. And the more that I tugged on these different threads of things that people didn't understand, the more I uncovered how much work there was to be done. So to bring the full circle for you, Jay, is that what ended up playing out over time is I'm like, man, there's no way I could possibly move 1,000 businesses individually. We're going to need a team. We're going to need a big team. And so that's where I began that process of recruiting other coaches and kind of bringing them into the fold.
Wow, that's such a cool story, how it all kind of came together. And then you realize that you have this big, scary goal, which if it's not a scary goal, we want our goals to scare us at least a little bit.
Yeah. I call it the pucker factor. You kind of want to pucker up a little bit.
That's well said. Everyone immediately knows what that means. You told me as well that digital marketing really changed the trajectory of your business.
Yes.
Maybe share one or two instances, or maybe just the biggest one, how digital marketing really helped propel you moving forward?
Yeah, so it would, so it was my, I think it was my third or fourth client. It was EIC Marketing, a digital marketing agency, and the young man, first time business owner, went out on his own, was good at digital marketing, decided to start his own agency. I didn't know anything about digital marketing at that time. I understood traditional old school retail, or not retail, but print, radio, TV advertising. That's what I did for 25 years, or what my exposure was in the businesses that I ran. But I didn't truly understand digital. I had some perspective on it. I had an online leads business at one point. I had some other, but not really depth. And things had evolved and changed. And so Dustin was the owner of EIC. He and I connected at at a networking group, and he asked me, he's like, "Look, I can't afford you, but I'd really like to work with you." And he says, "There's some way we could potentially work together." I said, "You know what? I really don't want to understand the digital marketing agency. So let's do a trade of service. I'll coach you once a week for 90 minutes, and then we're going to switch seats and we're going to turn it around. And then you're going to tell me, you're going to answer all my questions about the digital marketing agency." And he's like, "Bet, no problem. I'm down. Let's make it happen." So that's how we worked together. And for 2 years, that's how I learned everything I needed to learn about the digital marketing agency. Fast forward, I realize this is going to be an important component of my business model. I'm not prepared for it. I'm not quite sure how I'm going to lean into this yet. But I started initially with LinkedIn. I looked at the different platforms that were out there, and I felt like the one that would give me the most, credibility, or at least allow me to establish myself and really kind of endorse me as a business coach, it was going to be LinkedIn. LinkedIn was one at that time, was the one that was probably the least tapped into from a lead generation perspective. And then what I found was, as I leaned into that, everybody kept saying, "Hey, we really want to get into video." I get it, makes sense. But I was struggling with how I was going to do that. And so what ended up happening was, one of my other coaches, good friend of mine, actually a mentee of mine, he came to me and said, "Eric, I know you really need to do video. Here, I have an idea for you." I'm like, "I can't do scripted video. It doesn't work for me. Every time I try and do it, I mess it up." And he said, "Well, what if I just interviewed you?" I'm like, "Oh, that could work." Right. And he's like, "You're fine on Zoom." I'm like, "Yeah, because I'm not trying to follow some guidelines or script or something." He goes, "Well, I'll just ask you the question and just let you go. Use your 25 years of knowledge and experience and just recant stories and whatever, however that works." So we got into YouTube and developed our podcast of the Biz Coach Show. And the combination of the posting on social media and leveraging LinkedIn, and then using the video content from YouTube, and the combination of those two working together has really allowed me to grow. LinkedIn, now we're a little over 30,000 followers. And our YouTube channel, we just 2,000 subscribers, but we get about 25 to 30,000 views a month. We're definitely getting the exposure, and it's helping dramatically. As a matter of fact, I would say that most of the coaches that come to me through LinkedIn, and then go and watch some of the YouTube channel and see, and like, "Okay, yeah, I can work with this guy. I'd like to be engaged with this guy." I even use that as a filter for my clients. I'm like, "Look, you have an amazing business. I'd love to work with you, but before we work together, why don't you go watch one or two of my shows and just get a feel for my personality? Because that's the best way to tell whether or not you're going to want to enjoy or appreciate working with me."
Yeah, absolutely. That's just a great strategy. Video, podcasting, it's the very strategy Jumpify Labs is using. All right. So right now, Eric, you mentioned that your focus is on scaling your coaches instead of scaling clients directly. Share a little bit about the thinking behind that.
So two thoughts on it. One, in the grand scheme of things, being a coach, I love it. I love working with clients and getting the experience of moving businesses from where they are to where they want to go, particularly when we help them identify where they're stuck. However, like I said before, it doesn't align with my mission. And we've not really deviated from that mission of 1,000 business owners are achieving $1 million in top line revenue. And we've got a handful, about a dozen or so, that we moved from that space to where they are now, or at least scaled them, right? Taking them from where they were. Like, we have some now that are in the 2 to 3 million range, and we moved them to the 5 to 7 and $10 million ranges. So the opportunity, though, is that it's just a lot, right? So they're going to need to be other people. I also believe that there's a large number of coaches that are out there today that have great skill sets, exceptional skill sets, but they may not always understand exactly how to scale a business. Marketing is a component. Sales are a component of scaling a business, certainly an important component of it, but not the only component. So when somebody says you want to grow and scale your business and then they promote sales and marketing, logically it makes sense. However, that's not necessarily the case if operationally the business isn't prepared to support that growth. Or more specifically, if the leadership isn't ready to sustain that kind of growth. And I mean that in the best way that I could possibly mean it, because sometimes the leadership is not for a business to grow to a certain level. The founder, the leader, whoever, or the leadership group has to be prepared to think like a business owner at that scale before they can reach that scale. They have to grow before the business can grow. And that's why I think there's a lot of coaches out there that talk about mindset and things like that, which is really important. But my belief is you have to have both the tactical skills that are necessary in your business, as well as the mindset to be correct and accurate. And so the combination of the two is really important. And I don't know that there's enough people out there that have the balance of all of that. And so I realized it's got to be a team of coaches. It can't be any one individual coach. And even for myself, the areas that I'm good at, there's also areas I'm not as good at. And that's why I started bringing in, for instance, I'm good with finance, but there's a certain point I'm going to sit with a client. I'm going to say, you need a fractional CFO, right? I have a good background in leadership and leadership development, but there's a certain point where I'm like, no, okay, you really need to go deep into leadership development and work with your team, and you probably want to bring in a couple of these trainers that I would recommend. So whatever that looks like for that individual business, and so that team of coaches, why that became so important is because I started identifying I can't be all things to all people. No coach could be, well, if you're being honest with yourself. But if you work collectively as a cohesive team, and you identify, okay, now they're ready for the next piece that's going to move them from here to here. And we talk about that in my book, The CEO's Playbook for Scale, the 8 phases of scale, right? As they move from each of the different phases, there's certain things that they need to be prepared for at the next level of phase, because I believe wholeheartedly what got you here won't get you there. And so helping that owner identify, okay, great job getting where you're at. Now, the reason you're not moving from where you are to where you want to go is because you're not either mentally prepared for it or systematically your systems and processes aren't prepared for it, right? And they would break under the pressure of the growth. So we need to identify where those opportunities are, and then we fix those opportunities to move them. So, and then there was a second piece of that. You asked the question, why the transition to building coaches or developing a team of coaches. Certainly the scope is one of it, but 2, I'm probably a better coach of coaches than I am a coach myself. That my career in sales, I was a good salesperson. I was actually probably above average, certainly top 20%. I had guys beat me all the time, right? That was and I could never catch them. They were just much better salespeople than I was. But I would get promoted time and time again because I could create systems that would teach 10 other people how to do what I was capable of doing. And in leadership, you don't need the best salesperson. You need somebody who can teach 10 other people how to do what you can do. And similarly, I believe that I'm not just a good coach, but more importantly, I'm better at developing other coaches and showing them and helping them create, or even more collectively, creating a cohesive infrastructure and framework that all these other really good people at what they do can contribute and provide. And so we can actually make a really, really good system that allows business owners to find more success.
Yeah, amazing. And I'm like you, Eric, where I subscribe to the school of thought where you don't necessarily have to be the best player to be the best coach. Someone
Absolutely.
that comes to mind is Marty Schottenheimer. He was never a good player, but he was an outstanding football coach.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, there's definitely different skill sets required for each of the roles, and being the great player does not necessarily mean you're the best teacher at how to play the game. Okay, so you did mention your book. You have another book that's in the works. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
That is the book that's in the works, the CEO Playbook for Scale. Yeah. And I'm excited. And I've been sharing the context of the book for the last year through all my content that I promote, whether it's on YouTube or in LinkedIn or other platforms. But the actual release of the book won't happen until Tuesday the 13th. So January 13th.
Ooh, it's coming up
Yeah.
real soon, right around the corner. All right, Eric. Well, let's start to wrap up here. Who is My Biz Coaches built for, and who should possibly look into it?
I would say anybody who has found that they have identified that they would like their business to be in a different place than where it is, right? That either you're stuck you feel frustrated that you're stuck and haven't find the growth. If you looked at your numbers and your numbers are pretty consistent, the same over the last 3 or 4 years, there's an opportunity there, particularly if you're sub, say, $10 million. If you're sub $10 million and you haven't had a significant growth year over year, chances are you're stuck somewhere and there's something that's in the way that you can't see. Right. But anytime that the business isn't growing, and I don't mean like, 200, 300%, that's not necessarily always feasible once you get to a certain point. But if you're not growing pretty significant year over year, particularly in the early years of your business growth, chances are something's in your way, meaning one of these core functions that we talk about, these core competencies. And if you can't identify it on your own, objectively looking at your business, then that's where you really want that objective perspective from somebody else to come in and help you identify what that is. That's really where I feel like our gifts are aligned, is we can help you identify where those opportunities are and then put an actual strategy and system and process in place to help absolve it.
Amazing. And what would be the first step if they realize, like, you're saying exactly the words right now and they're thinking, oh my gosh, that's exactly me. What's the best first step for them to actually reach out and see if it's a mutual fit to work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. Just go to mybizcoaches.com. There's a ton of content in there, number of different places where you can find a spot to schedule an appointment and just have that initial consultation with us. Happy to have that conversation, walk through and help you identify some of the opportunities, even if it's just a conversation for us to learn more about your business. And that's all it becomes. We're totally fine with that. We just want to provide the insight and guidance where we can. And if there's an opportunity to work together, great.
And at the end of the day, there's nothing but just takeaways you can get from a conversation.
That's right.
Right. So absolutely. If you're listening to this episode and you're feeling like, hey, maybe Eric can give me some insights objectively from just someone else who's scaled businesses up to over 100 million, then please reach out to Eric. And for Jumpify Labs, if you like stories like this from other entrepreneurs, other leaders that are pushing the envelope for innovation and pushing the envelope for business growth, definitely tune in for more. My name is Jay. Thanks so much. We'll talk again soon. Take care.